So it begs the question, if you're going to protect life, liberty, and property, do you understand policies that will do that versus those that will destroy it? And I'm thinking most of our elected officials don't. In their zeal to do good, they pass more and more legislation that does nothing but undermine the very fabric of this free constitutional republic. If you dig back in our history, you'll find this concept of Rex, Lex, and Lex Rex. How many of you have heard that term before? Just a few. It's Latin. Rex meaning the king, Lex meaning the law. There was a time when the king was superior over the law. The king made the law and imposed the law. In our nation, and before, look back to the Magna Carta, this decision that the law ought to be superior to man. We pass a fair and just set of laws that apply equally to everyone. This is a constitutional republic set up to protect life, liberty, and property with a fair and just set of laws that applies equally to all. Civics lesson over, go home, we'll be free and prosperous. That's all you really got to know. That's all you really got to know. And instead, we have corrupted that such that we think government is the church. When people are hurting and their family's not taking care of them, whose job is it to care for your hurting neighbor? It ain't Austin's. But we've so corrupted this society that we think everything belongs to the government. It's not what our founders believed. They understood that there were three pillars in this society: individuals and families, churches and communities, and the government. And they each had a role, but government's job was to provide a fair and just set of laws to make sure that you didn't trample your neighbor's property and life and freedom. So you come back to the question, dear candidate, do you understand the difference between policies that protect freedom and those that destroy it? And this candidate, for 13 months on a campaign all over Texas, has said, I believe that there are two elements essential to freedom: private property ownership and gun ownership. As essential to freedom as air and water are to life. And if you want to go back and watch the town hall from last week, which is archived at medinafortexas.com, you'll see that I read from some of the writings of our founders where they talked about how important private property ownership was to freedom. It's not just about dirt, really. If you begin to understand private property ownership, you'll realize that the artist's property might be a painting, and the photographer's might be a picture. That is your property, and you have to have dominion over that. When your government takes your property, you know what you do? You quit producing. You quit working. So the first property is the dirt. That's the first. And we don't own anything in Texas. Everything that our government does ought to paint a very vivid and clear picture for us that they know they're the landlord, they're the overlord, and we're the tenants, and we're the serfs. You pay rent, call it property tax. You want to build a carport next to your house, you got to ask permission from the landlord to do that. Whose property is it? Yours or the city's? Yours or the county's? You want to drill a well? You want to pump some water? You want to irrigate that farm, you say. Whose property is it? You scream under the abuse of eminent domain, but it's theirs. Why should they have to ask you to come through their property? See, everything they do ought to tell us by deed. In word, it's yours. On paper, it's yours. But in action, the government's. Private property ownership is an essential element of freedom. And this campaign to eliminate property tax in Texas is about restoring freedom. The beautiful thing about freedom, it walks hand in hand with prosperity. Right. It walks hand in hand with prosperity. We start to take the courageous stand in this state to make men free, truly free. There won't be an economic crisis in Texas. Right. We've got natural resources galore, and the thing that truly makes a nation wealthy, people. We've got the best and the brightest that any land could ever hope for. Industrious, hardworking, diverse people. You need an IT guy, we got him. You need healthcare experts, we got them. You need construction workers, boy, we can build it. You got an oil well fire, where did the oil well fire putter outers come from? Texas. You know, you got a crisis in the world, where do you look for help? Texas. Get the government off the back. Start to take those courageous stands to make us free. We won't have an economic crisis. And we'll begin again to show the country what freedom and prosperity looks like. And suddenly this little incubator case will spread all over our nation. But it means you can't keep doing what you've been doing. Private property ownership is an essential element of freedom. Get rid of property tax in Texas and severely harness the use of eminent domain so that we restore again true private property ownership in this state. Now, all of us in this audience are probably a little bit pragmatic, and we know that we need government, we need a set of fair and just laws, and we have to fund that government in some way. We fund local government and schools in Texas with the property tax. That's the reality of where we are. Fortunately for this campaign, and really fortunately for Texas, there was an organization created in the early 90s in Austin called the Texas Public Policy Foundation. They have studied Texas, and they have been a conservative think tank for years. They have been championing eliminating property tax. But nobody had a definitive study, and they weren't really articulating it from a freedom perspective. I've said I don't care what the fiscal ramifications are. Government's job is to protect freedom. You got to own your property, and we'll find another way to pave the street, fund a police officer, fund the schools. You can't have my freedom to do that. We're going to restore property because it's a freedom thing. But the reality is you'd all like your schools to continue to be funded and your cities to continue to be funded. And for us, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, fortunately, has released a study last April. They commissioned Dr. Art Laffer and others to look at the Texas economy and to look at tax reform. They believed that the property tax was a burden on Texas that Texas could not long bear. And that study, I think, does a great job for those of us that struggle with understanding economic ideas to say, really, it's pretty simple. You could think about the economy like a mule. A mule is a beast of burden. It carries things and it does work. And the Texas economy is a beast of burden. It can carry a load. But if you don't stack that load on its back properly, it'll founder. And it won't do the labor that you would like it to do. That study says income tax and property tax are about the poorest loaded pack that you can put on the back of that mule. That property tax and that income tax weights that animal down in such a way that he can hardly carry it. But if you take that same weight